Now that we've discussed some of the most popular criticisms of religion, let's look into some of the best responses to these criticisms, as they are discussed in the book God Arises. The nature argument. Let's start with Julian Huxley's statement. If events are due to natural causes, they are not due to supernatural causes. Perhaps the best answer to this argument is given by American biologist Cecil Boyce Hamman when he said, "Nature does not explain. She is herself in need of an explanation." While there is no denying the fact that science has provided us with a vast storehouse of knowledge, science has its limits. There is a point beyond which science can offer no further explanations. Scientific discoveries then fall short of giving us the kind of answers provided by religion. The fact is that the entire body of modern scientific inquiry is concerned only with the question, what is it that exists, and not the question, why does it exist? Take the example of a chick hatching from an egg. The embryo develops inside a hard shell, and then the chick comes out when the shell breaks. But how does a fragile chick that is only a lump of flesh break such a hard barrier? In the past, people would simply say, God breaks the shell. But today, microscopic studies show that a small hard horn called an egg tooth appears on the chick's beak. It uses this to break the shell, and the horn falls off a day or two later. To an atheist, this might seem to disprove God, but it actually just pushes the question further back. The new question is now, how did the horn develop exactly when it was needed? These discoveries are only the possession of more detailed information, which does not tell us ultimately why these physical processes take place. Science does not tell us how or why the laws of nature came into being, how or why they continue to exist, or why they cause the earth and the heavens to function with such unfailing precision. Studying and analyzing how the engine of a car works does not deny the existence of the engineer who invented it. The study will only reveal the mechanics of the engine. In fact, the ingenuity and complexity of a car engine will make one appreciate the engineer who designed and developed it even more. Similarly, discovering the workings and complexities of natural forces only answers questions on how they work. It does not deny the originator of these natural forces. Cecil Boyce Hamman said, "Where the mysteries of digestion and assimilation were seen as evidence of divine intervention, they are now explained in terms of chemical reactions, each reaction under the control of an enzyme. But does it rule out God out of his universe? Who determined that these reactions should take place, and that they should be so exactly controlled by the enzymes? One glance at a present-day chart of the various cyclic reactions and their interactions with each other rules out the possibility that this was just a chance relationship that happened to work. Perhaps here, more than any place else, man is learning that God works by principles that he established with the creation of life." The contingency argument. A simple observation of our universe will reveal that everything is contingent. Everything has an origin story. You were born from your parents, and your parents were born from their parents. A tree grows out of a seed that came from a tree before it. And everything in the observable universe gets traced back in time to a point of a singularity that exploded, called the Big Bang. That this made our galaxies and solar systems. The next obvious question is, where did the singularity come from? Religious people will then answer, God. And then the atheistic remark is, then where did God come from? Then religious people cannot answer this without relying on their holy books, only to reply, no one created God. The atheistic argument is that the issue with contingency is that the chain will never end. If there was a God who created the universe, and then there was a God who created the universe, then who created that God? Given that there is no end to this contingency argument, it only makes sense to end the chain of contingency at the origination of the observable universe and declare that there is no sign or proof of anything preceding it. But there is a logical fallacy with this atheistic argument. As Maulana Wahiduddin Khan highlights in his books God Arises and Izhar-e-Deen, the contingency argument compels us to at least consider a source before the start of the universe, even if that source is unobservable. Contingency is the law of the universe. Therefore, the law must be applied to the universe at its beginning. Given that we observe a universe around us, we have no choice but to consider, at the very least, an originator of this universe. To the question of who then originated the originator, Maulana answers that if atheistic thinkers are ready to end the chain of contingency at the beginning of the universe, then there should be no hesitation to end that chain at the level of an originator of the universe. The question is not between a universe with God and the universe without God, but rather a universe with God or no universe at all. Since we know that the universe exists, then an originator of the universe must also exist. The clockwork universe. Determinism versus divine intervention. In the past, scientific scholars arrived at the conclusion that all events on earth and in the heavens took place according to immutable laws of nature, leaving no scope for divine intervention. Many, like Sir Isaac Newton, believed in God as the prime mover or first cause, who initiated and designed the universe, much like a watchmaker who makes a watch, assembles the parts and arranges them in a particular order, but afterwards has nothing to do with it. This was known as the clockwork universe. In this view, everything in the universe works and interacts according to its material properties, leaving no room for human choice or divine intervention. All events in our lives and the universe could be explained simply by analyzing the facts and natural forces behind it. It suggested that if you knew the position and momentum of every particle, the future was entirely fixed. This was also called materialist determinism. Even seemingly random events, like the outcome of a coin flip or a die roll, could be predicted if enough information were known about the position of the object and the forces acting upon it. While determinism was once the leading thought, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle left the scientific community speechless. The principle states that you cannot perfectly know the position and velocity, speed and direction of a particle at the same time. It suggests that electron behavior is fundamentally probabilistic rather than strictly predetermined, a field of knowledge now known as quantum mechanics. This discovery did not sit well with Albert Einstein, a strict determinist. In protest against the randomness implied by Heisenberg's work, he famously declared, "God does not play dice with the universe." This sparked a decades-long civil war in physics. While the younger generation largely rallied behind Heisenberg, others remained deeply skeptical. Scientists like Niels Bohr, Wolfgang Pauli, and Paul Dirac sided with Heisenberg, while Erwin Schrödinger sided with Einstein. In fact, Schrödinger created his famous Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, specifically to illustrate how ridiculous he found Heisenberg's interpretation to be. Eventually, the majority of scientists accepted Heisenberg's principle over Einstein's objections, simply because it worked. It accurately predicted how atoms behave, how lasers function, and how transistors, the basis of all modern computing, operate. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle effectively removed the barriers that materialistic determinism had placed against a belief in God. Heisenberg himself often spoke of a central order. He observed that the subatomic world is not chaotic. It follows incredibly precise mathematical laws. To him, the fact that uncertain particles still form a coherent, beautiful universe suggested an underlying intelligence or spirit holding the structure together. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle not only allowed for a God who originated the universe, but also for a God who can directly intervene and manage it, perhaps by simply deciding the direction of an electron's spin and then letting his natural laws take their course. The psychological argument. Psychologists are correct in holding that childhood ideas are sometimes repressed and later expressed in adulthood in different forms. However, To infer that this specific human characteristic is what gave birth to God and religion is to jump to a flawed conclusion. In fact, recent research has empirically proven that humans are predisposed to believe in God and the afterlife. This suggests that such beliefs are a natural part of the human condition, rather than a mere byproduct of childhood experiences. The researchers emphasized that the project did not seek to prove or disprove the existence of God. Instead, it sought to determine whether concepts of the divine are entirely taught or are basic expressions of human nature. Their conclusion was clear: humans are naturally predisposed to these beliefs. Simply because certain childhood events affect adult thinking does not mean that all adult thinking is an effect of childhood events. Take, for example, the belief in God. It is unfair to claim that an individual is only religious because they were raised by religious parents. If that were the case, we would not see examples of people with religious upbringings turning towards atheism, nor would we see individuals from non-religious backgrounds finding God in adulthood. The history argument. Scholars who study religion solely through the lens of history or social science often fail to use the correct perspective. In doing so, their view of religion becomes distorted. For example, imagine looking at a square from an acute angle and calling it a rectangle. The square remains a square. It is simply the angle of observation that is incorrect. It was from such a skewed angle that T.R. Miles asserted that religion is a product of a certain type of interaction between man and his environment. The fundamental mistake these scholars make is to study religion as a purely objective external issue. They collect historical material indiscriminately under the label of religion and then form a general opinion based on that surface level information. Miles argued that religion, like any other subject, can be treated as an objective problem and studied through the scientific method. The first step, he claimed, is to list ideas and practices associated with different faiths together: gods, demons, sacrifices, prayers, and moral rules. However, this approach is like grouping different life forms, animals, plants, and bacteria together as a single category instead of studying them independently. While scientific analysis may begin with broad categorization, it must inevitably penetrate deeper into each specific subject to be considered a sincere study. It is a mistake to classify all different forms of faith under the generic heading of religion. Take democracy as an example. While democracy is defined as government by the people, the political organizations of the United Kingdom, the United States, China, and Egypt are vastly different, yet they all claim the label democracy. Similarly, different religions vary fundamentally. For instance, Jainism and Buddhism do not believe in a creator. Grouping them with religions that do believe in a creator is the antithesis of genuine research. To be studied sincerely, every religion must be evaluated on its own terms. When viewed only through a historical approach, religion is seen as a mere social process that evolves like any other activity, rather than a divine reality. If religion were truly just a social process, it would only survive as long as society granted it status. If society discarded a tradition, it would simply vanish. But the reality of religion is different. As the eminent physicist Fred Hoyle puts it, this moral or religious impulse, whatever we choose to call it, is extraordinarily strong. When faced by opposition and even by powerful political attempts at suppression, it obstinately refuses to lie down and die. The Marxist argument. The Marxist approach to history is based on the hypothesis that economic conditions alone are the factors that shape humanity. According to Marx, religion emerged during the eras of feudalism and capitalism. He argued that because these systems were built on exploitation, the religious and moral concepts that evolved within them were merely doctrines designed to condone and uphold that exploitation. However, this theory carries little academic weight, nor is it supported by human experience. It is based on a total denial of human will, regarding individuals simply as byproducts of their economic conditions. In this view, man is like soap manufactured in a factory, molded by his surroundings, possessing no independent mind and simply conforming to his conditions. But if this were an incontrovertible fact, how could Marx himself, a product of a capitalist society, have revolted against the very economic conditions that supposedly molded him? If we follow Marxist logic, and if the economic systems of the time gave birth to religion, then we must also conclude that Marxism itself is merely a product of those same capitalistic conditions. If the Marxist critique of religion is correct, then the same critique must be applied to Marxism. In the end, there is no scientific or rational proof to support the claim that man is nothing more than a puppet of his economy. Ending thoughts. The reality is that no matter how much evidence of God one observes in nature and science, those intent on denying it will often retreat to improbable theories rather than acknowledge a creator. There seems to be an almost innate suspicion that recognizing a deity will somehow rob one of their freedom. To those who cherish a lack of accountability, any thought of abridged freedom is especially dreadful. In his book, Witness, Whittaker Chambers recounts watching his young daughter one day when he became unconsciously aware of the intricate shape of her ear. He realized how impossible it was for such a delicate convolutions to have come about by mere chance. They could only be the result of premeditated design. But he pushed this thought out of his agnostic mind because he realized the next logical step would have been to design presupposes a designer, a thesis he was not yet ready to accept. Reflecting on this incident, Thomas David Parkes, a research chemist and former chairman at the Stanford Research Institute, writes, "I have known many scientists among my professors and research colleagues who have similar thoughts about observed facts in chemistry and physics." Similarly, in his book, Man Does Not Stand Alone, A. Cressy Morrison asks a poignant question: how much must man advance before he fully realizes the existence of a supreme intelligence? As Maulana Wahiduddin Khan writes, the fact of the matter is that things are as they are. We cannot change the hard reality. We simply have to acknowledge and accept it. If we are to avoid an ostrich-like attitude, our best course is to acknowledge the reality of religious truths. By denying them, it is mankind alone who loses. Our denial in no way alters, harms, or diminishes these truths. The truth remains the truth, whether or not one chooses to accept it. Thank you for watching the entirety of the God Arises series. If you have any questions, please write to us at info@cpsusa.net. We would love to hear your questions and your feedback. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon so you can be notified of future videos. Thank you.